some misconceptions about this. People say they want the woman to have the right to abortion, and this bill isn't really about taking away that woman's right, but this amendment to the Constitution would have no restrictions whatsoever. Babies can be taken from their mother's womb right at or during birth. There are even cases where people have cut the neck of babies, have cut the spinal cord. Dr. Gosnell and I have proof of all of this, of babies who were born and they were killed because of this kind of vague law which has no restrictions. And it's not just the baby, it's the woman. Women are being manipulated by larger groups who have special interests to think that this is a wonderful right and they should be fighting to have abortion until birth. We're talking about taking the lives of a human being. And we're also talking about putting women at horrible risk. Let me tell you what some other states have passed for laws. 42 states require an abortion to be performed by a licensed physician. In Vermont, it doesn't have to be. It can be any medical person. There's no restrictions. If I were going to have an abortion, especially a late-term one, I would want to have a physician taking care of me. 19 states require that an abortion be performed in a hospital at a specific time. No such thing in Vermont. We're trying to prevent women from having back alley abortions. But this is going to open up all kinds of unscrupulous healthcare providers to do this type of thing, and women will be even more at risk. 43 states allow individual healthcare providers to refuse to participate in abortion. 42 states allow institutions.
Red light.
Okay. I have more and I will come up again.
She's going to respond. Go ahead.
I completely, Donna, disagree. I'm a registered nurse. I've been one for 31 years. I cannot perform abortions. I'm not licensed to. So regardless of whether there is a specific law in Vermont, all of us medical professionals have to follow, and this is in law, the scope of our practice. So there is no, unless it was a really, truly unscrupulous person working with an individual who had no access to facts, there is no healthcare professional that would be performing an abortion outside the scope of their practice. Abortions also do not need to be performed in hospitals. That's another barrier for women who have made the very difficult choice to have an abortion early in a woman's pregnancy. There are procedures that are done just by taking medication, so it's ridiculous to ask or require that process be done in a hospital. It's another barrier. So what's really at stake here is an attack on the bodily autonomy of women. I trust women. I trust medical professionals. Those decisions need to be made between a woman and her medical professional, not by anyone else in this room, not by the government, between the proper licensed medical professional and a woman. I trust women and I trust medical professionals.
Yes, sir.
Dan Monger, New Haven. Marie, I'm going to ask this question of you, since that's really the forum by which this is set up. We ask a legislative member. But you said this is an attack on the bodily autonomy of women. doesn't Amendment 5 really allow a woman to have an abortion at the end of the third term, some people call it the fourth term, because she doesn't like the sex of the baby? No issue about the health of the mother involved.
I'm not even going to respond to that. That's so ludicrous and ridiculous. It doesn't happen. And the information that some of you are using to try to bolster your arguments are unfounded. So I'm respectfully not going to respond to that.
Mark?
Mark Moban, Addison, Vermont. This is a little bit tangential, but comes back to that. There's reports that is amending the Constitution to remove references to slavery. And I've always been proud that Vermont, even before it was a state, banned slavery. Now, Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, said that no one can be free until everyone's free. So after we had the emancipation, he worked to provide that women had full suffrage and had full rights under the Constitution. Victor Hugo in 1917 said, slavery exists. It's called prostitution. We have a sex trade industry in this country, and it is a form of slavery. And I think that we have to recognize the connection between them. Now, abortion is the essential enabling technology to allow that to happen. So you have a minor child, and they say gets pregnant, but she doesn't get pregnant, somebody got her pregnant, can go get an abortion without notifying her parents or her guardian. She gets the abortion, she goes back into the same environment that where she got pregnant before. The evidence, as far as DNA and everything, is destroyed, and the rapist gets away with it. To me, that does not look like that's protecting women. Thank you. You can respond.
Well, I was going to change the subject, if that's okay.
No, it's not.
Oh, is there a response to from this? I apologize. I was going to move on to one of my issues.
We'll give it another couple minutes.
Well, there's two threads there. So there's Proposition 5, which is the reproductive autonomy proposition for amending the Constitution. There's also Proposition 2 that deals with slavery as it's. So Vermont was the first, well, we were a republic then actually, the first to ban slavery. The language, the way it is expressed, was a bit opaque. It referred, there were age limits related to it. All the testimony we've taken says that those age limits apply to indentured servitude, not to the slavery prohibition, which was an outright prohibition from the beginning in 1777. So I serve on government operations, as I mentioned. That's where the slavery proposition came, and we just voted language unanimously on Friday to simplify that language and say that slavery and indentured servitude are prohibited in every form. It's a simple clarification of something that's actually been quite well understood for a long period of time, but people felt as though it was important to be absolutely clear. So I won't make the jump back between slavery and prostitution, but I will say that we took quite a bit of testimony around the sex trafficking industry. It does exist in Vermont. I believe there's something like 14 quote-unquote massage parlors that relate to sex trafficking, and we're working with current law enforcement to improve the state's ability to intervene in those affairs. Part of the reason indentured servitude might sound rather old-fashioned, but if you've come to this country, someone has paid your way here, and you work in the sex trade in order to pay your debts for having been transported to the United States and rehoused here, that's another form, really, of indentured servitude. And we want to make sure that we clarify that it is illegal, and now we're working to clarify the connections between that and modern day law so that those practices can be broken up and prohibited.
Heidi, I believe you're next. I appreciate you guys getting next to the mics. I'm beginning to figure out who's next. Same topic, or you changing?
Yes. I'm Heidi Willis from Salisbury, and I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm sorry. I want to broaden the discussion a little bit. I do support this effort. We do not exist on this planet alone. I am also a Christian, and I believe in the right for all creatures to live on this planet, and we are in the middle of a 6th grade extinction right now. Animals are going extinct at an alarming rate. Insect populations have plummeted. We do not exist on this planet on our own, and the reason that these things are happening is due to our overpopulation. We are over the carrying capacity of the planet. So if we want to reduce abortions, which I think would be a very wonderful thing, I think we should be providing reproductive services and technologies available to women so that unwanted pregnancies can be prevented. That way, that prevents both abortions, and hopefully it will enable us to begin to limit our populations so that we will be able to exist on this planet in the coming future. If we don't do that, the planet will limit our populations. So,
I'm going to do one more comment on this topic, and then we're going to go to something else. And if there's time at the end, we'll bring it up again. Donna, I guess, are you next?
Well, on this topic I am, but I don't know if anybody else wants to say something on this topic.
I'd like to change the subject and...
Okay, I'll let you do that right after.
Okay, this is an important topic because we're talking about changing our Constitution, and I think that women are being bamboozled by the big business of abortion providers. We're not thinking about protecting women at all. Late-term abortions, they are dangerous for women, and I have statistics that I can give anybody. I just don't want to take all my time. I have studies that I'm using. I'm not basing this on just my own feelings. And I don't think that the legislators are really looking at the real facts of what is happening here. Mid and late trimester abortions are dangerous for women, and the state is not looking at that at all. I just think they're not protecting them from this. The incidence of deaths goes up in women that have abortions exponentially after 8 weeks. And I do have facts that prove that. Somebody's just willing to look at them. I'd be happy to share them with any of the legislators. And I have actually tried to do that and have been rejected by them. So if all of this is happening, why are the legislators driving through this bill and this amendment? Who has the most to gain? Surely it's not the unborn children or the vulnerable women who are suffering. I don't think these organizations really care about women, they care about profits. The later the abortion is done, the more it costs. Plus, if the organs and other tissues are more developed, the more money they will bring in. Right now, the National Institute of Health, using federal tax dollars, has created a demand for late-term aborted babies to make at least 2 types of humanized mice to use in experiments dealing with HIV therapies. The actual amount of the contract is $13,800, and this is from a report by CNS News.
Donna, red light. Okay, we're going to change the topic. If we have time for this again, we'll bring it up at the end.
Can I respond once again to this?
Just quick.
Yes. Lois Farman, Middlebury, Vermont. I'm an RN, have been for over 50 years. I have seen the results of what you would term kitchen counter abortions, back alley abortions. let me tell you, they are going to happen if they are not legalized. I support women's rights, the right to their own reproductive freedom, and we need to keep this legal and medically safe. Thank you.
Next topic, please.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank our legislators for being here in this open forum, and that we can get together as Vermonters, and although we might vehemently disagree, hear one another out and know that we are humans, we are neighbors with different opinions.
Who are you?
Sorry, I'm getting to that. Thank you. My name is Rachel Cummings, and I'm the new Executive Director of the Counseling Service of Addison County. And I'm here today to appeal to our senators, Senator Hardy and Senator Bray. The budget in the House has turned over to the Senate, and it does not include cost of living increase for the designated agencies. The designated agencies are community mental health service agencies throughout Vermont, and we provide services from very young children to very old Vermonters. Everything from psychiatric services, support for people living with developmental disabilities, people who need counseling, people who need medication-assisted treatment, who are suffering from substance use disorder. But my agency, CSAC, which is one of the largest, I would say top 10 employers in the county, is struggling. We cannot compete with larger institutions. There's not enough workers in this county, and I'm asking our senators to please advocate for an increase for mental health workers in this community. It's a vital time for us. It's just critical for our ability to be able to employ good people, to retain good people. And if you're really interested and invested in the health of families and in the health of children, it starts with investing in our workforce. Thank you.
Sure. Need a response. You can go right here if you'd like.
I totally agree with Rachel. And as a member of the House Healthcare Committee, we spent a large portion of our committee time responding to the proposed gubernatorial budget, which actually cut, not even level funded, but cut funding for crucial community mental health services and peer services. So a lot of our work was just about what Rachel was talking about in recommending to the House Appropriations Committee that we, as in Vermont, actually increase the financial support for these services, mental health services in the community that data shows, and the people themselves that need these services show are very, very effective. The House Appropriations Committee did its good work, and like all of the other issues that are important to Vermonters, there was not enough money in the budget for everyone to get what they needed. So it was really hard to see that appropriations bill move forward without the funding that we need. And we focused in the House Healthcare Committee exactly on workforce development. The people who are frontline workers, meeting people's mental health needs right with them, are underpaid, don't have access to professional development as much as they would need. Those folks, those highly trained folks with a lot of experience, are then going elsewhere where they can make more money, and therefore leaving great organizations like the Counseling Services of Addison County even shorter staffed. So I think it's something I look forward to working on over the summer, and as a community with Vermont Care Partners and Counseling Services of Addison County, to see how we can build energy around the next session and seeing how we can raise more funds to give to mental health services in our county. And thank you for your good work.
I would just briefly add, so last summer the Senate President and I and others came down to meet with CSAC and discuss operations. And last year we were able to put through a pay increase. But it was, because we're in catch-up mode, that increase was, we all know, insufficient to really empower the organization to do its best for the long term. So thank you for speaking up, and the back of Montpelier it's good for us to hear this because it helps us in our discussions with our colleagues.
Yeah.
Natalie Peters from Middlebury. I'm a board member of the Parent-Child Center. I have to say that everything's been said, last two speakers in here, is also true at the Parent-Child Center. It's at a crisis position, same as the counseling service. And you as a public should know that your dollars couldn't be better spent than going to those organizations and the work that they do. So if we can't do it at the state level, perhaps the donations are a big help to both organizations. But I just want to underscore.
I think, Mark, the young lady in pink, but I'm not sure, you'll be next after that.
I'm not responding on that, I have changed the subject.
Okay, Mark, you responding on that?
No, I want to go back to slavery.
Okay, well,
I
let's
just
do
want to
that.
say,
Can we quote you?
Change the subject.
I'm Diane Livingston, owner with my husband Phil Livingston on Railview Dairy in New Haven. What I am trying to find out and see if someone other than Cabot or who else to get Vermont dairy products back in our schools on the lunch program. We have some, but because I think it's Reinhardt, am I saying that right? The biggest, they can underbid everybody, even all the small farmers in the school system. So the hot lunch people that try to get the products back in the schools cannot do that because what Cabot offers for a bid is not what they can pay. So I'm just trying to find out who in the legislature or in the state can help get our schools back to Vermont products of any kind in our school system, whether it be Cabot, and I have a letter here that Cabot is working on, but I've also been told by the hot lunch people that they can't afford the bid, and I'm arguing with Cabot, who we ship to, that I want them to lower their bid. But as you all hear, we're running a business, so we can't undercut ourselves to put our product back in the school, and I am a Cabot member, and I told him, I want you to undercut it because this is where our livelihood starts. And if our kids don't get raised knowing that a Vermont dairy product is in their own school, then we have to figure out how to get it back in there. But you can't just do it and fight the big one, Reinhardt, and the schools I know are all on a budget, but I'm here just to see if there's somebody here who can help me persuade lunch programs to help try and bring this all up to something. So we pay advertisement from our dairy into the system for advertisement. So we're already launching for it to be in our schools, but they're again fighting against big people.
Thanks, Diane, didn't recognize you back there, my eyesight's getting worse.
Sorry.
Cousin.
Diane, thank you so much for that question. I'm Ruth Hardy. I'm your other state senator. Apologies for being late. I will get to your question. I just wanted to apologize for being late. Monday mornings are the only morning I have of the week to get my kids up and get them to school, and it is hard to get teenagers out of bed on a rainy Monday morning. So I'm a little late, so I apologize for that. I serve on the Education Committee and the Agriculture Committee, and this topic of school lunch and getting more school meals and getting more local foods into our school meals is something I've been working on in both of my committees. We have a bill that we're working on in the Senate Agriculture Committee, which is the Farm to School bill, that I am actually hoping to add language and also funding to that would increase slightly the amount that we reimburse or help schools to fund school breakfast, school lunch, and also our summer meals programs. And in order to incentivize them to purchase more local foods, including, of course, dairy products. The summer meals program actually is an area where that could be a really good benefit, because my understanding is that actually purchasing local milk and milk products goes down in the summer because schools are closed. So, and also it's a time when a lot of our kids have a hard time getting healthy meals because schools are closed. So trying to put more funding into that program hopefully will help some of our local dairy farmers, especially if we add the requirement that, or the incentive that they buy local products. We also have been wrestling exactly with this issue of how to get the suppliers, include Reinhardt is the company that holds the contract for the school purchasing around the state for most of our schools. And we actually are trying to get them in to testify and to try to work on this issue in particular about why is it so difficult for them to get local products into their contracts for our local schools. So I don't have the answer specifically yet, but I would love to talk to you more about it. And if you'd like to come up and speak to this issue with our committee, that would be great. But if not, just talking to me so that I understand it a little bit more. We are trying to work on improving this situation so that schools are able to overcome the barriers. Part of it is supply, part of it is delivery to schools, part of it is pricing. So there are multiple barriers, but it seems absurd to me too that our kids can't be drinking local milk and eating local cheese and other produce and products in school. So thank you, and let's talk more.
Some of that problem, just a comment from the moderator, is that the packaging part of that, to get the right size container into a school.
Right.
I know Monument wanted to be sure they were in Middlebury, and then they couldn't package that size container, so.
Yeah, so the packaging,
with hoods.
you're right, the packaging for the milk is an issue because the larger milks, there's a requirement at the federal level that kids get 8 ounces of milk, and those larger plastic ones that Monument Farms work are bigger than 8 ounces. So they go with the smaller hood ones, which are not all Vermont dairy, although I know that some farmers do ship to hood. But they're not as tasty as the Monument Farms.
Especially the chocolate.
Right, exactly. Monument Farms chocolate milk is the best. But also the expense of processing and filling those small ones was too expensive for a lot of our local processors, so that's also an issue. I actually have a bill about milk, but unfortunately a lot of the rules for our school lunch programs, school breakfast programs are created at the federal level. So we're also talking to our congressional delegation. I stopped Congressman Welch in the hall in the State House last week when he was there and talked to him about this very issue. So we're hoping to send some information to the federal level so that hopefully they can advocate for Vermont school lunches and Vermont farmers at the federal level. So I just want to assure you that we're working on it. I know Representative Smith probably wants to weigh in as a local farmer too, so I'm going to give him the mic.
He's going to get the green light. All right, if you can answer that or go talk to that, that'd be great.
Well, I was going to mention Monument Farms Dairy because they used to supply all the schools in the region with milk until some changes on federal law and the size of the containers and the fact that they had to go from you remember those little cardboard wax paper containers, that they had to go away with them and come up with a new filling system, so they went to a 16-ounce bottle, a plastic bottle of milk that didn't fit into the school system. It was too expensive for them to change that system to go to 8 ounces, so they just had to step aside. But the distribution and getting that farm products into our school systems or into our local stores is another issue that we're going to need to spend some time on. I think Ruth is well aware of that. But I will tell you, I provide some of the schools with our local meat. And I had one school that had purchased meat for about a year. We started in the fall. They said we can't afford it anymore. We have to go away. A couple months later, they called me up and asked if I would bring my meat to the school again, and I asked them why. And they said because the kids clean up every bit of it. So there's a difference in the quality of the products we have, and I think that needs to be part of the equation.
Hi, Rachel Cummings again. I'm going to take my counseling service hat off, and Diane, speak directly to you. As a former business owner and a kid who grew up with parents who had a home food manufacturing business, don't forget the older Vermonter community. Age Well and the other area agencies on aging provide Meals on Wheels, and older Vermonters also deserve to eat and good Vermont products. So Lindley, based in Rutland, is one of the biggest producers of Meals on Wheels in the state of Vermont and in New Hampshire and throughout New England. And they have a pledge of buying local. They use gleaned foods. So here, for our senators and our representatives in Vermont, don't forget the older Vermont population and their nutritional needs too, and that they, just as much as children, deserve good, nutritious, tasty food.
I've also heard some talk of maybe processing in Vermont that will handle some of this stuff too. Now, let's see. Do we have another new topic here, Norm?
New topic.
Young fellow over there on the left.
Gordon Kaywood from Middlebury. And I brought the subject up at last week's meeting, wanting to get feedback from our legislators. But the person that took the mic after me changed the subject, and so the legislators did not have a chance to respond. But I do want to hear from you. The subject is a resolution that is being introduced into the House chambers on Thursday, and also in the Senate chambers sometime soon. A resolution to ban basic nuclear weapons in the state of Vermont. When the proposal was to base F-35 aircraft at Burlington, and our congressional delegation was firmly in favor of it because of the possibility of jobs. They did not know at the time that these airplanes were going to eventually be outfitted with nuclear weapons. And we don't want that in Vermont. First of all, it's inhumane to have nuclear weapons of the capacity of 50 kilotons, which is 3 times bigger than the Hiroshima bomb. Secondly, we don't want Burlington, or the rest of Vermont for that matter, to be on Russia's target list now that what's having nuclear weapons in Vermont. In the event of a first strike, Burlington would have to suffer very badly. I'd like to hear from the legislators, hoping that each one of them will co-sponsor this resolution. Thank you.
Does somebody have an answer for the gentleman?
I haven't had a chance to sign on to this resolution yet. However, I did take a look at the language and also read up a little bit on it. My understanding is that the F-35s have the capability of holding nuclear weapons, but that the plan is right now that they won't, and that's not part of the F-35 mission in Vermont. However, it would be a decision of the federal government, not the Vermont National Guard, as to whether the U.S. military, as to whether or not that would occur, and that we may or may not know about it. I don't know, Senator Bray, if you have more information, but that's my understanding of the situation.
So I serve with Senator Polina in the afternoons, who's the lead sponsor of the resolution. And I support the Air Guard base and the F-35s for a variety of reasons, but The nuclear capability, I think, was a surprise to many people, hadn't been discussed until just lately. I've read some conflicting information about the likelihood that they would ever be equipped for this mission out of Burlington for a variety of logistical reasons. For instance, they have a very short range, and if you were in the sort of catastrophic event that we're talking about, nuclear war, I don't think my understanding is that those weapons would be positioned far closer to any kind of theater where they could be used should this sort of basically unthinkable thing ever happen, and that it would not involve nuclear weapons being in Vermont. This would be a home base for those planes. But I don't, it's still an emerging picture, so I'm not in favor of having nuclear weapons in Vermont. I am supportive of the Vermont International Guard as a functional group.
I will agree with Senator Bray that we are getting conflicting information. I did speak with a military person who said at this time the F-35s are not equipped to house nuclear bombs. And then I've also heard that they might be in the future. And this person actually said he's against the F-35s because of the design of the plane themselves is not, he would have chosen another plane, but that's beside the point. Regardless, I did sign the resolution because I agree that I do not want nuclear bombs anywhere, but I definitely don't want them in Vermont. And I will continue, thank you for bringing this up. I know all of us will continue to follow the issue and ask serious questions. Thank you.
Same topic.
This is the first time I've wanted to have numbers. Like you go to the Christmas store in the deli, take your number.
This is the same topic. I'll get back to the other one later. But I was a Russian linguist and an intelligence analyst between 1968 and 71. And Burlington was a target then because you had Atlas missiles in Swanton and you had the Plattsburgh Air Force Base. The strategy that was explained to me was drop a nuclear bomb in Lake Champlain and wipe out the whole valley. I don't think that has changed one bit as far as targeting. The Russians, if they were to do a preemptive strike, would strike everywhere, not where they know there is, but where a retaliatory action could be taken from. So you're ground zero no matter where you are in this country. Thank you.
Young lady in white,
My name is Sally Roth.
come up close to the mic.
My name is Sally Roth and I'm from Bristol, and this is on the same topic. I believe that satellites can show exactly where nuclear capability exists anywhere in the world, and that does make Vermont a target. The bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima was killed 300,000 people. The bombs that the F-35s can carry are apparently 50 times that potency. The F-35s we hear would not carry the weapons, but I understand they are currently being wired for them so that they can easily add the weapons at whatever time the Pentagon thinks that it's necessary. My husband and I have the opportunity to spend time in Tucson, Arizona every winter, where there is a very large Air Force base, and the F-35s and many other planes are constantly overhead. They're extremely noisy, which would disrupt people in the Burlington area and other areas of the state. But it is much more important that we become a target. I agree that anywhere in the country would be a target if there was a preemptive or a retaliatory strike, but I would much prefer that we don't have these planes. This would be the first time in the country that an Air National Guard has nuclear weapons. And so I think we have a responsibility to make a statement on that. And if you care about this resolution, you can call the Vermont State House Sergeant at Arms at 802-828-2228 and ask to convey your wishes to your representatives, whatever side of this you're standing on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Silverman?
Thank you. Dave Silverman from Middlebury. We talked a lot about today, we talked a lot about saving lives. There is a bill sitting in the House Human Services Committee that would do just that. It is a bill to decriminalize the possession of buprenorphine, which is an opioid agonist. It's a drug that allows people suffering from opioid and opioid addiction to stave off withdrawal symptoms and progress in their recovery. That drug is prescribed in America today, but many people who are in the throes of addiction use it without a prescription, and when they do so, they risk arrest. In Chittenden County, for the last 9 months, they've unilaterally decided to stop arresting and charging people for possessing buprenorphine. That is part of the reason why Chittenden County saw a 51% decrease last year in opioid overdose deaths, 51% cut in deaths. The rest of the state, when you exclude Chittenden County, saw a 27% increase last year in opioid overdose deaths. 27% more versus 51% less. Here in Addison County, we don't arrest people anymore for buprenorphine possession without a prescription. I spoke with Dennis Wigmans, our state's attorney, this weekend. He told me that the last time he got a case, and he's been in that office for about 2.5 years, last time he got a case, he told the police officer, take him to the clinic up in Bristol and get him a prescription, don't bring him to me anymore. So we already don't do this in Addison County. And I hope our legislators will support this bill statewide because it does save lives, actual lives, not theoretical ones. These are real people. These are our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, our aunts, our uncles, our parents, our children. They are of all political persuasions, of all economic status. Please help them proceed towards recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I am a co-sponsor and I support the bill.
Yes, Bob Zillow, Bridport. I want to talk about the F-35. When I worked at Simmons, Goodrich, UGC, and Virgins, I was involved in the F-35 program. I've been retired 10 years, so my data is a little late, but it takes a long time to design one of these aircraft. When the aircraft was proposed almost 20 years ago, the military wanted a common airframe for fighter bombers for all services and for export sales. So part of that mission is a fighter bomber. There are several other missions. The Marine have a vertical takeoff version right now, and the bomber version is much more complex. The fuel system, which I was involved in, is used to balance the aircraft. Once they drop the bombs, the weight and balance change, so the pump of fuel around to maintain the trim. Very complex. The planes that are coming here are not the bombers. It is highly unlikely there ever will be the bombers. One, for the range issue, they have a relatively short range, especially at the super cruise speeds. They are really built for interceptors, for the Russian bombers who are flying again off our coast. They're the interceptors for that. To change this to a bomber would be a big deal. Our planes would go away, and they have to have new F-35s to come here. The odds of that happening are almost zero. But the military will never commit to zero because they have to do whatever they have to do. The concept of Vermont rejecting an F-35, we are proud of Ethan Allen, the Green Mountain Boys. We've always stood up and done our part. Right now, part of our part, as we have done for the last 70 plus years, is to support the Air National Guard here, who's probably one of the best guards in the nation. Please do that. Thank you.
next, and then the gentleman after you.
I think Reggie's next.
Oh, is he? Okay.
And I want to change the topic.
I haven't finished.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Reg Spoon in Middlebury, and I want to support the F-35, just get it out of here. It does not belong in Vermont, it does not belong in a civilian airport. It is an Air Force vehicle, it should be in the military control, wherever it is. And it won't be if it's in Burlington Airport. If that airport is cleaned out because of the F-35, none of us will be able to fly.
Heidi?
Heidi Willis again from Salisbury. I want to change the topic. Did you want to talk on the same topic? I want to move to something a little bit simpler, but is vital, more vital to water. Good topic for today, perhaps. And I'll use my Addison County Riverwatch Collaborative hat. Chris, I know you were introduced a bill early in the session about funding water quality cleanup and so forth. I'm part of a group that does water quality sampling in the county on 6 area rivers and streams, have for the last 25 to 30 years. We just had our first sampling event last Wednesday, and shortly after we heard that funding for processing our samples have been cut. And so we've been asked to eliminate all of our E. coli sampling and all of our turbidity sampling. Last year, this is the second year in a row that this has happened. Last year it was just the E. coli sampling that was asked to be cut. This year they've added the turbidity. I don't want to think about what's going to happen next year. So part of this may be that the lab has just moved, the new state lab has just moved to East Randolph. So there may be some issues around that and organizational, but a lot of it's staffing. So a lack of funding to process the samples. The collaborative is one of 22 largely volunteer groups. I see a volunteer sitting here, one of ours, who collect water samples on our rivers and streams in the state, and then the state processes the samples. But we can't do this if we don't have funding for processing the samples. So I'm curious where that's at, Chris. This has been frustrating for the last couple of years.
So thank you, Heidi, for the question and for your work. Vermont relies, there's the Agency of Natural Resources, which holds the legal responsibility to lead and regulate water quality throughout the state, but they have roughly 336 partners throughout the state, including local collaboratives like the Riverwatch. We also have conservation districts, we have the regional planning commissions. There's a variety of partners in the whole system, and part of the reason that we can get our water quality work done as cost effectively as we can is that we have many people who actually volunteer to do this work. So I was unaware of the cut on funding to support E. coli testing from last year or turbidity for this year. So I'd love to, after we adjourn here today, I'd like to talk with you, get some more details so I can go follow up. You're right, they moved to a new lab. That's caused some logistical problems as they reorganize how they handle samples, where they go, how they're shipped, and all that stuff. But in the end, it's actually disturbing to me to hear that this mostly volunteer workforce is out there collecting important data, because as we move forward on water quality work, we're trying to be increasingly driven by scientific data, so that because we're spending other people's money, we want to make sure that we really understand what works and what doesn't work as well as we had hoped. And the way you sort those things out is by collecting data on a constant basis over a period of time. So I'll be happy to talk with you after and try to make sure. Just in round numbers, Vermont used to spend roughly $30 million a year on water quality work. And we're now, we've bumped it up to, it was $58 million this past year. There's a commitment to fund somewhere between $50 and $60 million level out of the Senate. So it is a very large effort, and we have decades of work ahead. It frankly is a little surprising and disturbing to hear that we might be cutting back on the kind of data that you're talking about.
Yes, I'd also like to thank you, Heidi, for the work that you do and years progress. And how long have you been doing it? 20 some odd years?
Yep, almost 30.
Almost 30 years. And I was very skeptical when they started this program as to how it might impact the agriculture community, the municipalities. But they have demonstrated they're very responsible in collecting the data and presenting the data in a way when they find a problem. They work with the landowners, the municipality, the regional planning commission to find the financial resources they need to come in and correct those situations. And there's several examples around the county we could talk about to demonstrate what has happened. I think that if we're really going to know and understand what's happening in our watersheds, this program needs to continue. We need to know that we're making progress and reducing our water quality related issues and finding solutions for that. And this certainly is a great program for doing it. And Chris had sent over to the Senate, from the Senate to the House, a water quality funding bill that actually in my introductory remarks said that it didn't include any funding, which it doesn't, but it was trying to resolve an issue of how to get the funding that we do have down to the groups that are doing these water quality projects, especially the non-regulated water quality projects would be stream bank plantings. You know, if you are familiar with Lewis Creek and you drive up through there and you've watched it over the last 20 or 30 years, you're seeing a tremendous amount of improvement with vegetation and fencing to keep the farm animals out of that area. They've done a great job. That's the best example I can think of that you can actually see as you're driving around Addison County. But we need to continue this. But what we're struggling with in the House, and we just took it up this past week, and we've had a few discussions, we've taken quite a lot of testimony on it, but how can we shrink that review board down to a point where it actually can function much more efficiently than it looks like I understand it to be right now. And so we took testimony from a lot of the watershed groups, conservation districts, municipalities. They all had concerns about the way the structure was. We wanted to make sure that we were as efficient as possible to take that money that the state has designated for water quality improvement for these types of projects and get it to the ground as efficiently as we can so that we don't use a lot in overhead. So that's what we're struggling with right now. I think it's a good initiative. I thank Chris for putting together that idea. I don't know if Chris put it together, but certainly I heard Secretary of A&R talking about it last fall, and she was talking basically with the municipalities, but it's grown to include other people, and I think that's great. But the idea is to get that money as efficiently as possible onto the ground, doing projects to clean up our waters.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Cheryl Mitchell. My husband and I live over by Field Days. We raise sheep, and we're also the happy landlords of Wren's Nest Preschool, which is a forest-based preschool. I'm here primarily to thank all of our House members for voting H531, which is the child care bill, out. I believe you all voted unanimously in favor of it. That almost never happens, so it's a bill that has huge bipartisan support. And we know that it's going to make a huge difference if it passes in terms of what parents need to pay for child care, and also for the child care workers with some help in getting the education they need and perhaps a little bit of relief on their indebtedness when they leave school. So I'm here mostly to ask Ruth and Chris, now that it's in the Senate, if you'll be able to support it, and to say that we met Friday morning with 15 business leaders who said this is not just an educational issue for the kids or a financing issue for the parents, but we are unable to recruit and retain employees because of the child care crisis in our state. So whatever help can happen, and I know that you'll be up against a lot of budget issues, but in terms of workforce development, economic vitality, and the well-being of kids and families, I think it's a great investment. Thanks.
This gentleman that's been standing over me.
Can I respond?
Oh, yes.
First of all, thank you, Cheryl, for all the work you've done over many, many decades in our county for early childhood education. yes, I'm a strong supporter of the bill, and I've already spoken, it's now in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. I've spoken to the chair and expressed my strong support as one of my priorities for this session, that we provide additional funding and support for early childhood childcare and early childhood workers. So I will do everything I can as a junior senator to make sure that that bill gets through and is funded. I think you're absolutely right. It's a crucial thing for our families, for children, for parents, for employers, for the entire economy of Vermont. We've spent some time over the past week in the Senate talking about economic development, and I think this is a crucial piece to economic development, is to make sure that our families have high quality early childhood education. So I am a strong supporter of that, and yes, thank you to the House members who supported it and sent it over to us. So thanks, Cheryl.
Starting 2 years ago, I was arguing as a member then of Senate Education to increase that funding, because we had let it stagnate over a period of time, so it was roughly, I think, $9.3 million short of what it once was. So I'm glad that we're finally basically catching up with inflation and trying to get fuller funding. For anyone who thinks that $9 million more is a tremendous increase, it's actually probably the most modest amount of an increase that we could propose just to get back to where we were. There's a bigger opportunity to do more, and I look forward to supporting it.
Go ahead, first one. And I'm doing some propositions, and the Constitution there. We need to look at those closer before we do those. One on slavery. It'd be nice to erase any trace of that and not remember it. There's a point to keeping that in mind, not let it be forgotten. Form of slavery never much different. It has to do with sex trafficking and so forth. Amendment 50's Proposition 4, 5 is the only real purpose to that, because everything else in it is we already have, is to enshrine abortion in our Constitution. I think that's the last place we really want it. As Mary says, no responsible person would do that, and that would never happen. But we've seen a lot of things that would never happen, I think. Well, the question here is, there's several more propositions that have been posted, and what might be going on.
I think there may be a total of 7, and the chair of government operations is predicting that we may have more than 10 by the time we adjourn next year. So there is a cycle to all these things. You can only introduce them on this 4-year cycle. So, and then they must pass within this current biennium, and then I was saying before, then in the next biennium they have to be repassed again by the House and the Senate, and then they are brought to a referendum. So I'd say at this point that the 2 that I'm confident are coming to the Senate floor for a vote are, and actually 5 already has been affirmed, so it's off now to the House. And Proposition 2, the slavery amendment, which makes the language more concise and clear, but preserves a prohibition on slavery. Some people thought that was superfluous. It's been illegal because of federal law, 14th Amendment, excuse me. If that's true, why do we need to say it at all? And the point was actually that many people are proud of the fact that this was the first, republic at the time to ban slavery. So they want to preserve that important marker in the state's history. Again, that'll be on the floor, and then we'll go off to the House. And then in the end, just to remind everyone, I said before, then it becomes, it's one of the only things we have a referendum vote on in this state, so that in the end, having, if it's passed House and Senate twice over 4 years running, then it's brought to Vermonters at large to vote in the November election.
Thank you. We only got a couple minutes left, Mark. Been standing there a while.
Yeah, same issue. I think Senator Mr. Bray was correct that the provision in the Constitution is inartfully worded, and part of the problem is that whole deal with indentured servitude. That's archaic. That's a holdover from the guild system. The problem is some of the southern states after Reconstruction used indentured servitude as a extension of slavery. But the question I have is why and where is it the provision that this state issue an apology and reparations for slavery, considering we have been opposed to it from the beginning? Thank you.
Okay, I'm about to wrap this up for the day, I think. Chris?
A quick answer to that is I'm not aware of a reparations. I know there have been discussions around reparations or a formal apology, but I'm not sure of the status. For instance, if anyone's bringing that forward in the form of a bill or resolution at this point.
Heidi.
So I just want to say how much, I'm changing the topic to the legislative breakfast, and I just want to say how much I value this gathering every Monday morning during the legislative session. I really am grateful for the legislators who show up despite their busy schedules, and I hope maybe we can talk at some point in time about ways to enlarge this, to make sure that other folks in the county know about it, to figure out ways to make it workable for legislators so they're not feeling overworked or overburdened, because I think these discussions are just immensely valuable, not only for learning what's going on in Montpelier, but from learning from each other about what's important and what people are thinking. So thank you to the Grange and to the Farm Bureau, and I hope we can continue and figure out ways to make it grow.
Thank you, Heidi. And all of you, I think, could help us out. Invite a friend or a relative to come with you when you come to a breakfast. The more people we involve, the more willing our legislators are going to be to come here. The more people that are here, the more it might go for them. So make them happy.
Can I just add, first of all, thank you to the Grange and everybody who supports this legislative breakfast. It's great for us to be able to hear from people. It would be really, really great to find a time that would be easier for parents to come to. This is a really, really hard time for people with kids. That's why I was late, because I have kids and I was trying to get them off to school. So if we could maybe find a time to mix it up next year so that we can get a more diversity of folks here, so that people who have children in the communities across the county are able to participate more easily, that would be fabulous. And teachers and people who have to get to work by 8 o'clock in the morning, that would be my suggestion. But that does not take away from the fact that I'm grateful for all of the work that you guys do to sponsor this and support this in all the places that it is. So thank you.
I echo the thanks, and I'm offering regrets from Representative Caleb Elder. Mondays, many of you know he has Michaela have a new baby. Michaela's gone back to work, and Mondays, Caleb is dad at home. So he sends his regrets, and thank you to everyone for making this happen.
We'll be inviting next week. If you get a chance to drive down there, send some friends there. I realize that the population that's here, most of them are retired, except for some independent businessmen here that can get away to come to these things. It's going to be hard to find a time when you can probably get everybody together. And we'll think about that in the planning. Anything else you want to say? Oh, by the way, thanks again for breakfast. If you pick up your plates and take them back into the kitchen, that'll save the our host much more chance to get the room.